Now we move on to last, but probably not going to be least again this year, but we'll see. And it is the Cincinnati Bengals. They went 9-8 last year. Obviously missed Joe Burrow for a good portion of that year. At the beginning as well, he was dealing with that injury, and nonetheless, so they a little bit of a tough year for Cincinnati, but this should be their bounce back, is what they're hoping. Obviously, with a quarterback like Burrow. But anyways, in terms of departures, let go of longtime running back Joe Mixon, also a former first rounder Jonah Williams, one of their offensive linemen, and then wide receiver Tyler Boyd, who was a staple for them for a while, and then also podcast favorite tight end Irv Smith Jr. was also lost in terms of free agency. And then on defense, also lost defensive tackle DJ Reader, who's also been a staple for that defensive line the past few years, as well as cornerback Chidobe Awuzie, and then safety Nick Scott, who filled in at times as well. And then also important to note, they did lose offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. He got the head coaching job at Tennessee. So maybe that could be a change, good or bad. And then in terms of additions, they brought in running back Zach Moss, who filled in very nicely last year for Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis, as well as tackle Trent Brown, who's always been solid. And we talk about big people. He's one of the definitely bigger dancing bears in terms of linemen, as well as tight end Mike Gesicki. And then also brought in defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins on defense and safety Geno Stone. And then they did, to note, the loss of their OC, they promoted their quarterback coach, Dan Pitcher, to offensive coordinator. And then draft-wise, addressed that offensive line that I know everyone's worried about in offensive tackle Marius Mims out of Georgia. So we'll see if he gets playing time this season. And then as well as on the defensive side, beefs up the D-line with defensive lineman Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, and also grabbed wide receiver Jermaine Burton out of Alabama in the third round. And then went back to D-line with McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M in the third round. So, should be a bounce-back year for the Bengals in theory, John. But what are your thoughts?
I'm going to start with the offense. First off, apparently Marius Mims is actually going to miss a couple weeks, dealing with an injury right now. So Trent Brown is going to start at right tackle. I'm interested to see what happens when Mims does come back. I don't know if Brown just will go to the bench and kind of be their, backup swing tackle or what. But apparently Mims was having a great offseason. Joe Burrow gave him an A+ in terms of how good he's been throughout the, the training camp and stuff. So whenever Mims comes back, we'll see what happens with Trent Brown. Does he, just go to the bench? Do they try him at guard or something? I don't think he's ever played guard, so I have no clue what happens there. But it seems like Mims was going to be the starter, so we'll see what happens there. But I do like the fact that they drafted Marius Mims, because if he's as good as advertised, then you've got him and Orlando Brown Jr. at your tackles, and that feels good considering the offensive lines that Joe Burrow has had throughout the years. That feels real good. They lose Joe Mixon. I'm not too pressed about it. Zach Moss had a really good season last year for the Colts when he did play. And then obviously, they have Chase Brown, who I think could be the potential starter at some point during the season, because he's a better pass catcher than Zach Moss. He's faster. He's more explosive. So I'm excited to see what Chase Brown could potentially do in that offense. So ultimately, Joe Mixon, I thought, he was kind of reaching that point where he was not very efficient. And so I really do like the kind of tandem duo you have of Moss and Chase Brown to kind of be the potential replacements. And I'm not too worried about the run game and the, quote unquote downgrade they might have on paper at running back because of, like I said, the inefficiency that Mixon has started to show. In the receiver room, you still got Jamar Chase, you still got T. Higgins, assuming that, some crazy trade situation doesn't happen there during the season. I like the addition of Mike Gesicki at tight end. He's very athletic. The Bengals have kind of just had this rotating room of tight ends throughout the years, though. So who knows, how impactful Gesicki will be for them. Because really it's just been the run game. It's been Chase. It's been Higgins. I'm interested to see who does fill the Tyler Boyd snaps, because he's gone. Apparently Andre Iosivas has been having a great offseason, but at the same time, it'd be weird if they put him in as the wide receiver 3 spot, because I believe during the whole offseason that he's had so far, because Jamar Chase has not been practicing, Iosivas has been practicing on the outside. So it sounds like I just don't know what happens there, because I think as of right now, he's kind of been listed as the favorite to be the wide receiver 3, but he's been playing on the outside. So would he be moving to the slot? I don't know. Does like Trenton Irwin continue to hold that spot because he's been kind of solid for them there? Does Jermaine Burton, who they drafted, does he start to win some reps there? He's had a really good offseason, but at the same time, there's been some reports that maybe he's not picking up the playbook as quickly as the coaching staff would have hoped. But it seems like, at least in preseason, it has not affected him because he's had some great preseason games. So I don't know. There's question marks on the offense, but I really don't think they're that big. As long as you've got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, your tackles, I think this team is going to continue to do what they do on offense, and the Bengals are going to look solid on that side of the ball. On defense, I do have some concerns, specifically in the secondary. Dax Hill, who they drafted from Michigan, he was a safety. They've moved him to corner, and apparently he's won one of the starting cornerback spots. I don't know how to feel about the secondary. They've got Jordan Battle and Geno Stone at safeties. Both feel a little bit unproven. Then, you've got DJ Turner, you've got Cam Taylor-Britt, who a lot of people were excited about when they drafted him, but once again, feels unproven. The only real spot that feels solid is Mike Hilton, who's probably going to be your nickelback, but I don't know how to feel about this Bengals secondary, especially considering, some of the losses they've had over the last couple of years, and it felt like, okay, we lose Jesse Bates, we draft Dax Hill, but now Dax Hill's going to be playing corner. Chidobe Awuzie was really solid for them. Is Dax Hill going to be the replacement for him? Is Cam Taylor-Britt that guy? I just don't know how to feel about the cornerback room. I also feel like their linebacker room lacks a good amount of depth behind Logan Wilson. He's been solid for them, but I don't know how to feel about some of the guys after that. It feels like they're putting a lot of stress on Logan Wilson to be kind of the guy. And then on the defensive line, you lose what's his name? What was the defensive tackle they had that was actually really good? Yeah, DJ Reader. You lose DJ Reader, and he's been, I think, very underrated in terms of how good he was for the Bengals on the interior. You've got BJ Hill, you've got Sheldon Rankins. Are they able to kind of fill the gap there? I don't know if Sheldon Rankins can be as effective as DJ Reader was. On the edge, they still have Sam Hubbard. They still got Trey Hendrickson. They drafted Joseph Osai, and he had moments. So I don't know. I think the defensive line can still be solid. I just don't know if interior will be as dominant as it was with DJ Reader because of how good he's been for them. And then, like I said, I'm worried about the depth at linebacker. I'm worried about even just in general the starters and the depth they have in the entire secondary. So I don't know how to feel about this Bengals defense. I could just not be familiar with a lot of these people's games, and Bengals fans would be like, no, Geno Stone he's going to be great, and Jordan Battle's having a hell of an offseason. I don't know. So we shall see, but that's definitely my concern with the Bengals.
Yeah, just to add on what you mentioned, especially on the defense, you already addressed defensive tackle. I'm also concerned defensive end-wise. Trey Hendrickson was having a contract dispute as well, and I'm trying to see, it's been no real update, at least what I'm seeing. So who knows how that may factor in regards to availability and if he gets off to a quick start, because after him, you mentioned Osai, who's been more of a pretty good rotation pass rusher, but who knows, if he'll be opposite of him. And then also Sam Hubbard's been okay, but DJ Reader was very underrated, like you mentioned, in the run game for them. Maybe not the best pass rusher, but still in the run game, he helped a lot there. And we saw a little bit last year with what you're already alluding to, is that once they lost a couple of their veteran pieces over the past few years and trying to fill in these guys, it's sometimes not the same, obviously. And last year, even defensively, I know they dealt with some issues on offense, personnel injury-wise, but defensively, I felt like they took a step back a bit. But hey, maybe now that the offense is full of strength, it's more of like, hey, we know the offense is our strength, defense just maybe make a few plays. And, we'll see if they can do that. And then, and then you mentioned linebacker, the depth in general could be an issue. I'm assuming also safety-wise, that's why they brought back Von Bell, maybe to provide a little bit of stability to the safety room, as well as familiarity with the system, as he was previously there as well. So we'll see, how that defense fares. And obviously, the big issue is the Bengals, will they stay healthy? And it'd be interesting to see the whole Jamar Chase situation, as well as T. Higgins, because apparently once again, it wasn't Jamar Chase, but Chad Cinco saying that, trying to say that Jamar ain't going to play all year until he gets a new contract. And so in Cincinnati, it's fair to point out that their front office has been known to be relatively cheap in terms of contracts as well. So we'll see. Obviously, they got these 2 stud receivers to pay. They already paid Burrow, but not much money to go elsewhere, I'm assuming. So we'll see how they fare and if they can kind of bounce back from a disappointing year last year. And of course, I want to preface too the start, because usually the past couple of years they have had rough starts to the season. And I know some of that's been because Burrow's been hurt, but nonetheless, they started behind the 8 ball multiple times the past few seasons, going 1-3, or I think was it last year 0-4 or something like that to start the season, and then having to have late season momentum, which yes is very good. Of course, that's obviously when you want to be playing your best ball in December and such, but also you want to be putting yourself in favorable situations positioning wise, so that maybe you can have a bye week or be playing the playoff games in Cincinnati as well, which I know has worked out from the past, but AFC as a whole feels like it's been much better. And like we mentioned, this entire division, they were 4th in this division last year, going 9-8 in this without Joe Burrow. And obviously, I think we expect this division to be extremely competitive and scrappy, and probably self-cannibalizing each other for playoff spots. Going into December and January. So we'll see if the Bengals can kind of quiet all that noise and bounce back and get back to the Super Bowl like they did a couple of years ago with their core. And but that is the AFC North. Next time we'll be doing NFC North. But that's the AFC North: Ravens, Browns, Steelers, and Bengals. So now we're going to move on to our position rankings. Like I said, we're going to do running backs and tight ends today. Starting with the running backs, though, we're going to start there. I'll throw it to you first, and luckily we're only doing 5. We're not doing 10. So you can do your top 5, and I'll do my top 5, and then we'll obviously confer and contrast afterwards. So obviously you go ahead first, John. Who are your top 5 running backs going into 2024?